I'm delighted to introduce and welcome Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg, the senior rabbi of BRS of Boca Raton Synagogue. Bruchim Haboim, welcome, B'chavod Gadol.
Thank you so much, first of all, Rabbi Brand, for hosting, for organizing, for collaborating, for your friendship, for your leadership. It's a great zchus to be able to collaborate and do this together. And Rabbi Schachter, I thought about forfeiting my slot. I could have listened to you for another 20 minutes and 20 hours. Thank you for your passion and thank you for your insights. I really want to build on not the same theme, but I want to build on the notion of the meta theme. To me, the Seder night, it's so critically important that we not lose ourselves in the minutia and the micro, in the gematrias and the arts and crafts projects, which have a place at Shabbos lunch. They have a place for us to review and take in and appreciate, but they're not the meta themes that are meant to be the foundational conversation pieces of the Seder. If Seder night transforms us, if the Chassam Sofer's insight that we make the bracha on Magid at the end, because just like the convert can't make a bracha over La'asiyasan, and we too are to be transformed by the experience of setting ourselves free and being set free, so the bracha is Asher Ga'alanu at the end, then the themes that we talk about have to not be the divrei Torah that are trying to impress, or that are highfalutin, or that are complicated, or that are drawing from the width and breadth of Torah, but meta themes that get us talking about what is freedom and what is slavery, and what does it mean in our own lives, and how is it part of our family narrative and story, and how does it craft and how does it shape my destiny. And that was what Rabbi Schachter so beautifully discussed, one meta theme, and I want to share with you another. One that resonates a lot for me in our time. I think that people are speaking, it's hard to be alive today and not be exposed and aware to these conversations. The notion of cancel culture, the notion of a world that's monitoring our speech and trying to limit it, filter it, hold people accountable. And I'm not weighing in politically on the whole movement of a cancel culture, certainly not on Dr. Seuss or Mr. Potato Head or anybody else. I don't want to talk about other companies or other icons. I want to talk about us. What does speech and the power of speech, something so fundamental to the freedoms of this country that we are blessed to live in, how does it connect to our ideas and ideals of what freedom is really all about? It's very interesting that Chazal generally, regularly, discourage us from being too talkative. And more ma'ad v'aseh harbe, say Chazal, say little and do much. We all know there are two types of people, the talkers and the doers. There are a lot of people who talk a lot and do little, but Chazal say be the opposite. And more ma'at, speak very little, v'aseh harbe, and let your actions do the talking. And Chazal add, v'chol amar bedvarim mevi chet, if you're verbose, if you're loquacious, if you just unfiltered speak on and you let everything come, maybe chet, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to sabotage your relationships, your happiness, your success. So generally speaking, the Jew is cautioned not on speaking, but on silence. The great Mashgiach Reuven points out that we teach a child how to speak and we celebrate. They said the first word, they said Zayda, they said Abba, Mami. We get so excited, we applaud them, we encourage them. But do we ever teach them to stop speaking? Do we ever encourage, do we ever reward silence? Or once they stop talking, they never stop. So generally speaking, but Pesach's the exception to the rule. Pesach's all about talking. Gemara tells us matzah is called lechem oni, lechem she'onin adarm harbe. There's a specific mitzvah of magid, to tell, sipur, tell a story, speak, and don't be succinct, but rather take as long as you want, go all night, don't stop speaking, dwell on the story and elaborate on the story and delve into the story. So what is it about Pesach that we have an entirely different attitude? Our mode changes. What we admire, what we aspire for shifts so radically from an attitude of listening twice as much as we speak to an attitude of don't stop speaking, don't stop sharing. Viktor Frankl, in his Man's Search for Meaning, describes what happened after they were liberated. On Shabbos HaGadol, I, like many other rabbis around the world, spoke about the notion of the chabura, of being together as a group, and why that's so intrinsically connected to freedom, the willingness and the ability to share. A slave scrounges, a slave selfishly only is caring about their own success, their own continuity, their own survival. An expression of freedom is an ability and a willingness to share, and that's what a chabura is all about. And we saw an entry from Primo Levi and from another Holocaust diary about that transition from the Holocaust to right after, the willingness to share. But Viktor Frankl also sees an enormous transition upon liberation, not in the willingness to share food, but a willingness to share something even more personal. He writes, the body has fewer inhibitions than the mind. It made good use of the new freedom from the moment on. It began to eat ravenously for hours and days, even half the night. It is amazing what quantities one can eat. And when one of the prisoners was invited out by a friendly farmer in the neighborhood, he ate and drank coffee, which loosened his tongue. And then he began to talk, often for hours. The pressure which had been on his mind for years was released at last. Listen to his words, Viktor Frankl. Hearing him talk, one got the impression that he had to talk, that his desire to speak was irresistible. I have known people who have been under heavy pressure only for a short time to have similar reactions. Many days passed until not only the tongue was loosened, but something within oneself as well. Then feeling suddenly broke through the strange fetters which had restrained it. He describes a person who's imprisoned, a person who's in a concentration camp, a person who's in servitude in Egypt, a person who's in the captivity of their body or even of their own mind, fails to find expression. There's an existential loneliness. There's the consequence of speaking freely. Person has these restraints and these filters. They're unable. And the affirmation that one is free, the indication that one has been liberated is now this desire to speak. Reuven Soloveitchik Zatzal, in his book, The Logic of the Heart, Logic of the Mind, writes, upon delivery from Mitzrayim, the Jewish people regained their self-expression. As long as they were subjected to Egyptian bondage, their self-expression was stifled and suppressed. But at that moment of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Jewish people regained speech. Slaves can't express or assert themselves properly. They cannot realize their potential. Only the free man is capable of doing so. The Igra Dekala on Parshas B'Shalach points out that when the Jewish people cry out to Hashem from the oppression, the persecution, the suffering, the pain, they can't even find words. They can't formulate or articulate. It's a groan, it's a moan, it's a krechts, it's a scream, it's a yell, it's an ouch, because the koach hadibur was in gullus. They were unable. When you are enslaved physically or spiritually or psychologically or emotionally, when you're in a dark place or a lost place, when you are unable, when you're stifled, when you're unable to express, then all you can do at best is krechts. The best you can do is issue a groan. Long before Reuven Soloveitchik, the Arizal, in his Priyetz Chaim and Shar Mikra Kodesh, in Perek Daled, saw the connection between freedom, the ability to be set free, and the ability to speak freely. And he saw that in the very name of the Yontif. Pesach, says the Arizal, famously comes from Pesach, a mouth that speaks. Because the mouth was in gullus, the power of speech was in gullus, it was in exile. A person who's at work is afraid to speak up. A person who in a certain social circle, because they're concerned for the consequence, stifles and silences their own words. That's not freedom. Freedom is the ability to communicate, to converse, to articulate. Part of our very affirmation of our freedom on Pesach is affirming the awesome responsibility that comes with freedom of speech. And that's part of what makes this great country an exceptional country. Israel celebrated its biannual seeming event today of yet another election. Democracy, the one we live in, the one, please God, soon we will merit to live in. These democracies, the First Amendment in America promises free speech. Free speech means we have the ability to protest or advocate or object. We can speak our minds. We can speak our minds. But the Torah's view of free speech is very different than what American liberty provides for us. Because even though we have a freedom reflected by our ability to speak, we're not allowed to use that speech to incite or to libel. You can't use it for obscenity or to plagiarize someone else's words. There are rules and regulations around how we express, how we use that power of speech, as fundamental as it is to freedom. Yahadus Torah, Judaism, also believes in the freedom of speech and sees the capacity to speak as one of the greatest expressions of our freedom. American law tolerates speech which is negative, which is insensitive, which is tactless. That's what we're seeing right now. Who should have a right? Bernie Sanders today agreed with Donald Trump, something that probably hasn't happened or won't happen again in a long time, when he said he believes that the past president should have the right to be back on Twitter. one of the fundamental freedoms of this country. Again, I'm not weighing in politically. I'm afraid to even mention names today. That's how unfree we are to even the assumptions that will be made about us. But they understand that there's a freedom, and America gives that freedom even when it's negative or insensitive or tactless. When Justice Lewin Brandeis affirmed the freedom of speech in a Supreme Court decision in 1927, he acknowledged that such liberty made possible what he calls, quote, the dissemination of noxious doctrine. Noxious doctrine. We don't believe in that. We, and this is what I want to communicate, that the Yontif, the Chag of Pesach, this great freedom, this great privilege, this great responsibility, this great opportunity to have that power of speech, what differentiates us from animals, doesn't give us a freedom of speech of noxious doctrine. Paro, says the Me'or V'Shemesh, Paro is osios ra. He's the Sitra Achra. Paro is when you use the power of speech to be a despot, a dictator, to make others suffer, to torture, to oppress. It's the power of speech in its worst form, to hurt and to undermine, to destroy, to marginalize, to judge, to make feel lonely and apart. Torah, in contrast, our Torah has no patience for noxious doctrine. Not only are we prohibited from Lashon Hara, whether it's true or untrue, right? Everybody, it's true. I'd say it in front of the person. The rules and regulations for how we use this gift, this freedom, we are enjoined. We have to be mindful in our choice of words. Our speech can't be noxious. We measure the acceptability of speech by a very different metric, whether it's Lashon Nikiya. Mazel tov to those who made a Siyam Amsachim. At the very beginning, the Gemara talks about a Lashon Nikiya, the importance, Behema Tahora and Ena Tahora. Our speech has to be clean and proper and concise and elevating. You can't use speech that hurts or profanity that degrades. The Rav Yaakov ben Asher, the author of the Torah, provides a method to understand the Jewish calendar called Ad Bash. Aleph goes with Saf, Beis with Shin, and so on. And he notes that the Aleph, which represents the first day of Pesach, is always the same day of the week as the Taf, when Tisha B'Av occurs. So if you want to set your calendar, you don't have access to Ma'izmanim, if you know what night of the week Pesach starts, now you know when Tisha B'Av is going to fall. The Beis, the second day of Pesach, is the same day of the week as the Shin, as Shavuos, and the Gimel, the third day of the week of Pesach, is the same day of the week as the Reish, as Rosh Hashanah. And parenthetically, it's been pointing out, though the Torah obviously doesn't go this far, that the seventh day of Pesach always falls the same day of the week as the Ayin, which is Yom Ha'atzmaut, the 5th of Iyar. Whatever connection there is between Kriyas Yam Suf and that miraculous day. So Pesach and Tisha B'Av are always the same day of the week, and they share this close association, which seemingly is much more than just coincidental. And some suggest that on Pesach, when we are denied and deprived the ability to bring a Korban Pesach, we should be acutely aware and remember the loss of the Beis HaMikdash, the Churban, and not only that it's not there, but how we got there. So we eat an egg, the symbol of mourning, and we remember how Hillel used to eat the sandwich of the matzah and the maror together when the Beis HaMikdash stood. But the Gra of Vilna Gaon was very opposed to seeing mourning as having any part of Seder night. Seder night is regal, it's royal, it's being free. We're not invoking images of mourning and of grieving and of sadness. So why would Pesach and Tisha B'Av be the same night of the week? What is the connection? Rav Mishor in his Lekach V'Alibov suggests that we open the Haggadah by saying, Kol dichvan yesev v'yechol, whoever hungry, come and eat. It is the most disingenuous invitation of all time. And this year, maybe it's a little bit more authentic, but if you recall last year, everyone's door was locked, everyone's window was hermetically sealed, no one was allowed within 50 feet of our home, or we thought we could die on the spot. There's not a more disingenuous invitation than pronouncing, everyone's welcome, there's plenty of room, please come, join, while the doors are closed and the windows are sealed. You want to be such a grace at Tzaddik? A week before Pesach, post online, stand up and clap at the end of shul and announce whoever should come. So why are we saying Kol dichvan yesev v'yechol, whoever hungry, come and eat? What is really going on? So says Rav Mishor, Kol, anybody and everybody, you're all invited to my Seder. Not literally and not formally, because I know it's not an invitation you can take me up on, but I'm communicating more about myself. We begin our Seder by recognizing the power of speech and how we want to use it. We start the Seder, says Rav Mishor, not by saying, this one's puzzle, and this one's no good, and this one's too from, this one's not from enough, and this is the shul I daven at, and the shul I'd never step foot in. We do the opposite. We begin Seder night by using the power of speech to pronounce, kol, everybody and anybody, the right of me, the left of me, more religious, less religious, those who voted the same, who voted differently than I, we're all going to sit together. Kol dichvin, everybody. We are misakein, we correct and repair the damage of Tisha B'Av. Destruction results from abusing that power of speech. And Geula, redemption, only happens when I use the power of speech to build bridges and to create connections and to repair the world that I'm in. It's what differentiates us as human beings from animals, Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim, the Targum famously, Ruach Mala, he gave us the ability to speak. And some of the Svarim HaKadosh and Hasidic Svarim point out, this is also true on Seder night. When we were in Mitzrayim, we couldn't daven, we couldn't find the words, we didn't have the time, and we didn't have the self-awareness or the margin, the space, the mindfulness to connect to our Creator, to the Almighty. We were suffering. We didn't even believe Kotze Ruach Avodah Kasha. We had so little faculty of vision, we couldn't even believe or dream of a better future. Pesach is the ability to speak also means not only to one another and how we speak to one another, but it's pointed out. Adam Harishon is given this power of speech. It's what differentiates him from the animal kingdom, and yet there's no one to speak with. There are no other human beings yet. This androgynous figure has not yet been divided. So to whom was he meant to speak? Why was he given this faculty and this power if there was no one to share it with? And the answer is there was. The Ribono Shel Olam. The core and essential purpose of the power of speech is tefillah, is to talk to Hashem. Oh, it also happens to come in handy to talk to your spouse or your children or your friend or at work. But the primary and central purpose for the power of speech is Hashem. That power was in Golus when we were in Mitzrayim. We couldn't find the words and we didn't have the energy. But Pesach, we have the ability to speak, to take advantage of that which differentiates us, to renew the promise to use speech, not in a way which results in a Tisha B'Av, in destruction, but a kol dichven, everybody. I love all Jews. Avas Yisrael, come around my Seder table. Not literally. I'm not inviting you. I am just displaying and demonstrating at the very beginning of the Seder how I use my power of speech. The Kavayasha writes in Perek Tzadik, one must recite the Haggadah deliberately and joyfully. He says you can't say the Haggadah like it's a burden. You can't be fabissina, and you can't be flying through it. You can't be mumbling it. He writes that the word maged has a ring similar to the word meged, which means that something sweet, it's pleasurable, like Rashi in Dvarim Lamed Gimel. We have to be, our speech should be pleasing, and it should sweeten other people's lives. Magid should be said with meged, not flying through it, using and utilizing the power of speech. Kol hamarbe. Speech is who we are. It defines that freedom, how we use it. Lo yachal dvaro. You can't turn power of speech into chulin, into something profane, into something secular. It should be something which is kodesh, which is holy. Too many around us are filling our world with their noxious doctrine, with their caustic and bombastic tone. Too many people are filling the world with hate and judgment. They are destroying, they're bringing churban. The Haggadah reminds us it's not just what we say, but the way we say it. It's not just saying magid, but saying it with megid, with sweetness. Before Pesach, this week we are rushing to finish cleaning our homes, but on Pesach we clean our speech. And we remember that the freedom that we enjoy and that we're blessed with comes with the responsibility for a lashon nekiyah. That on Pesach, sitting around that Seder night, it's not only important what goes in our mouth, but equally important is what comes out of our mouth and how it comes out of our mouth. It defines us. And particularly as these issues are being debated and defined in our day, let us remember that we have a tradition and a legacy that offers us its own definition of what it means, the power of speech. We should be zocha on this Pesach for our Pesach to return to a tefillah that is sincere and authentic, genuine and real, to use that power of speech to build bridges, b'chabura, as I feel so privileged to share tonight with my dear colleagues and to unite Woodmere, Boca, and Chicago. I thank you for this opportunity and wish everyone a chag kosher v'sameach.